John McLaughlin, great to see you again.
Great to see you. And, I'm doing well because Trump's president of the United States. So, he's making the world a better place. So that's a good thing.
Let's talk about this now. John, you've been the pollster, one of the key pollsters of President Donald Trump. You guided him to victory twice. So my first question now about after the first 100 days that are just passed, there have been a flurry of polls in recent days from NBC, CNN, New York Times, ABC News, even Fox News, having the president's approval down, sometimes as low as 37, 39%. Now, President Trump lashed out against those polls, calling them fake. Is he just mad, or has he got a point?
He has a point and he's kind of used to it too, because he's the president. A lot of those polls you mentioned, they had Harris winning. They had Biden winning. They had Hillary Clinton winning. They're ideologically opposed to us, and they're really upset that Trump is succeeding. I mean, he's closed the border, the open border that was letting people come into our country illegally. That's been closed. He's trying to make his tax cuts permanent. He's trying to end the war in Ukraine and Russia. He's culturally, he's changing the United States, that instead of punishing the middle class throughout our country in the heartland of America, he's trying to help working class people. So the elites are really upset. And let's specifically talk about those polls. The New York Times poll, for example, had 37% of their voters in that poll said that, in their registered voter poll, said they had voted for Trump for president. And statistically, that's poor polling, because President Trump won the popular vote in the United States over Kamala Harris by 2 points. We had 50% of the vote. That was our strategy. We wanted to win the popular vote, and we did it. And so in the nature of that polling, 9 out of 10 Trump voters approve of the job that Trump's doing. So if you don't interview Trump voters, you lower his job approval. So that poll is 13 points short of where it should be. So his job approval should be 10, 12 points higher. And the Washington Post ABC poll is even worse, because when you look at, they polled adults, not likely voters, not registered voters, adults. Just anybody happens to be over 18. They could be illegal immigrants. So when you poll them and you look at the internals of their poll, out of the 2,464 interviews they did, only 842 people were Trump voters. That's only 34%. And why did they do that?
Exactly. I wanted to ask you, why did they do that? Is it because they don't want him to be successful? They want to give the image that the nation's not behind him, and he's. Yes. I mean, they're probably among the lowest rankings, the ones that they produced, the lowest ranking in history. I mean, they're very low.
Well, it's a biased poll. It's a bad poll. It's not true. We have a new national poll we're going to post on our website by tomorrow, McLaughlinonline.com. Trump has, when we ask him, do you approve of Trump and his policies? We had 39% said yes. Do you approve of his policies? But you may not like his personality so much. That's another 11%. That's 50% approve. And when you ask, or do you disapprove of both? It's 45%. So 50 to 45, that's a very different poll. And our polling is based on likely voters for the midterm elections. And really, that's what this is about. They want to undermine the president's policies. They don't want him to succeed. They want the Democrats to take Congress back, and they like to, have Trump impeached again. Ultimately, this is what's going on. I mean, you have an elite in the country that doesn't like the president.
To be fair, we bring in some critics, or we quote some critics, and they say that one problem with your, and therefore with Trump's logic, is that polls survey registered voters. Registered voters are both, opposition, Trump, and people who have never voted. They haven't gone to the polls. So 87.9 million didn't vote for anyone at all in the last elections out of the 244 million. So they say, yes, it is accurate. Because you don't need to have half of the polls, interviewing or asking Trump voters. What do you say to this?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of the non-voters that they claim they're interviewing tend to be skewed against us because they're doing a lot of those polls online on panels, and people get paid to take those surveys. And there tends to be a more liberal tendency in a bias in those panels, and they don't take that out. And for us in the Trump campaign, our victory last year was based on, getting people, working class voters who don't normally vote, getting them to vote for Donald Trump, getting them registered, getting them to vote. So there's a lot of maybe Trump sympathizers in those non-voters that they don't even look for, because when you look at the internals of those polls, the non-voters that they include disapprove of Trump 2-1. So I think there's the bias. I think they're diluting this on purpose. And you got to remember the two cases we've talked about, ABC, Trump sued them and won because they basically libeled him, and he got he got them to settle, and they're going to contribute $15 million to his presidential library. And then he is suing the New York Times over similar stuff because they produced the fake news that, people got Pulitzer Prizes for the Russiagate, that scandal that now has been proven to be totally false. So there's ongoing litigation, but it's not just them. It's CNN. There's this, there's Spanish speaking polls that were put out said our ratings are bad, but the exit polls for the media have us getting 46% of the Hispanic vote in the United States, and Harris got only 51, which is bad news for the Democrats because that's a record for the Republicans, higher than George W. Bush got in 2004. And they have only 39% Trump voters, 59 Harris voters. So there's like a kind of like a liberal bias going through the media in the United States that they're trying to undermine Trump's policies by putting out fake surveys.
No, there's always, the question how you ask a question. And I think in the end, personally, my opinion, there is only one very important overarching question. That is, to all Trump voters, would you vote for Trump again 100 days after his taken office? And there was a poll actually by the University of Massachusetts, Amherst and YouGov, and the result was overwhelming. 98% of all the Trump voters confirmed and said, yes, we would vote for him again after 100 days.
Yeah.
Have you? What does your poll say about this specific question?
His base is solidly intact. That's why we have a 50% approval and 45 disapprove in our surveys that we're posting. I mean, his base. In fact, there's some voters that there's like 5 or 6% that approve his policies now that didn't vote for him, and but within his base, it's very solid. They support everything he's doing, and he is basically the reason he won the election again is he's been very loyal to his base. His base is right of center conservative, center right conservative. The opposition is radical left wing. So his policies of basically trying to bring manufacturing jobs and jobs back to the United States. He's got $5 trillion in investments now, $5 trillion in investments coming back in the United States, but that'll take time. The key thing is half the voters in the United States are not aware. We did this for the U.S. Chamber. 49% of all voters are not aware that this year in the United States, the Trump tax cuts, if they're not made permanent, they will lapse. And they'll be the highest tax increase in the history of the United States. Well, Trump has lined up the House and the House and Senate Republicans that he's going to be able to pass those tax cuts, have them made permanent, plus the popular no tax cuts on tips, no tax cuts on overtime. He'll make them retroactive through January 1st. That would be an economic boom. That would be something the liberal media in the United States really doesn't want to have happen. And every Democrat in the House and the Senate has already voted against making those Trump tax cuts permanent and against the new tax cuts. There's going to be reconciliation votes in our Congress the end of may go into June, but we will get those tax cuts passed, and that would boom the American economy, creating millions of jobs, just like he did in his first term. And that's what the Democrats are trying to undermine. They're rooting for a recession.
Just briefly, according to your polls, where does Trump, after 100 days in office, perform the best, and where is an area, a topic where you would go to the president and say, Mr. President, maybe you should focus on this area because the polls show that this is not very, your rankings are not very high?
His areas of best, without a doubt, it's securing the border, immigration, securing the border, because under Joe Biden, you had over 10 million illegal immigrants come into the country. Gang members, murderers, human traffickers, sex offenders. I mean, it was bad, and to a point where, and by the way, in these national polls, under the Democrats, they're using our Medicaid funds to pay for health care for illegal immigrants. Americans don't want that, 64 to 25, and so he gets his best ratings on securing the border, ending illegal immigration. It's down to like 99.9% of what it was under Biden. So that's very important because we had a flow of illegal drugs. We had a flow of criminals coming in. The Democrats are actually going to El Salvador and trying to argue that criminals, gang members of Tren de Agua, this Venezuelan gang group, should be brought back to the United States. We don't want them back. We want to keep those people out of the country.
Well, that's his best approvals is migration. The border is almost, watertight or totally secure, I should say. Where is the field where you say, Mr. President, you got to focus on that?
Well, on economics, on inflation, it's still the top issue. And economics are still the top. We found with the United States, 42% say the most important issue is economics. In that, 22 out of those 42 points have to deal with inflation. This month, there were economic reports came out yesterday. We have, for the month of March, we have zero inflation. But it's going to take a while for all the prices to go down and for our central bankers to realize they should be cutting the interest rates so that mortgage rates go down. Price of oil is going down, oil and gas, that's very important. So that's going to take some time, but that's really important. And the thing that would make inflation go down is precisely passing the tax cuts. You need economic growth to make inflation go down. I'm very close to Larry Kudlow, who advised President Trump, Steve Forbes, Art Laffer. These are well-known economists in the United States, Steve Moore. They are pushing his tax cut program again that will get voted on because it will create economic growth. If we get economic growth again, inflation goes down, jobs are created, better paying jobs are created, and the world benefits from the United States having that. The tougher issue is the tariffs because that's so complex. And he's trying to negotiate with all these countries in the world at once. So that's a tougher deal to make, particularly when you're dealing with like the EU and Canada, Mexico, and certainly China. And China has benefited by taking manufacturing jobs out of the United States. And that there's a lot of people in the heartland of America lost their jobs, lost their health care because companies went to, low-wage countries that don't have the same environmental regulations, don't have the same trade policies. So that the president's right. Like when we make a car, we put a small tariff on cars coming in from other countries. But on the other hand, when we try to sell a car in Japan, forget about it. They double the price. So I think he's trying to make trade fairer, and that's more complex. I'd rather see the tax cuts pass first, and then the tariff negotiations carried on after it because it's easier with a growing economy. So, what's interesting too is there was a growth statistic that was produced yesterday by the Bureau, whatever, in the United States, and the private sector growth was actually 3%. That's a good number, a good GDP number. But the government sector is being cut back because we're cutting government spending so that we can reduce inflation. So we'll see, and that will take time with the voters. That's really the most important issue.
We keep close eye on all those polls that you're bringing out. John McLaughlin, thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to speak to you again in maybe 100 days.
Yes, Urs, I look forward to it again. Thank you for the coverage.
Have a great day.
Thank you.